Hey, this is Bill DeWeese with Long Strange Journey, and this is my Hitchhiker's Guide to 10,000 Islands, Everglades National Park, and Everglades Scenic Waterway. So this weekend I received a text from a friend, and they were asking about camping here and canoe camping and visiting and whether or not to visit 10,000 Islands or Everglades and the Waterway. And so it was a great text, great question, but just not something you can answer in a text reply. So I thought I'd put together this guide. I've actually been quite a few times. Now, let me just say, this is a hitchhiker's guide. I'm not an expert. I don't pretend to be an expert. I've gone there a number of times over the last 10 years, and I've gone there in multiple modes, and one of them was canoe camping for 3 nights and 4 days out of Everglades City, and I've taken the boat down there and have gone out of the Everglades Rod and Gun Club and gone out fishing, and then also going out of Chokoloskee south into the Everglades Wilderness Waterway and camping in the Chickies. I've gone as far south as Lossman's, and so that's kind of the basis of area. I have not gone yet to Flamingo, so I'm not going to cover the area from, say, Lossman's down to Flamingo. I leave that to somebody else. So at any rate, so let me bring this up in Google Earth, and I'm going to jump to the 10,000 Islands area, which will get us in the vicinity, and we'll go through a couple of different things here. So first off, what are all of these different entities or jurisdictions? Well, the 10,000 Islands is an area sandwiched between Marco Island and Everglades City, and this is here in Southwest Florida. And then you have, and I'm actually going to go down here and I'm going to turn on the park boundaries. So I'm in Google Earth Pro, and I got the National Parks layer, and I'm turning on the park boundary. So you can see in this green area that's going through here, the Everglades National Park consists of the Wilderness Waterway, which is this inner band collection of rivers and lakes and such. You also have the River of Grass area, Big Cypress, and all of that. So I'm not going to deal with that. I'm going to deal specifically with the Wilderness Waterway, and we'll talk about the outer Everglades. And then north of that, and there's some good reasons to go north actually, this is the generally referred to as the 10,000 Islands. And so you've got all these different entities. There's part of this is the Fish and Wildlife for Florida. Part of this is the actual National Park Services. So one is way more regulated than the other. In fact, most people refer to this as unregulated. And there are some regulations, obviously. But the camping regulations change, and that can be advantageous. So the first time we went to Everglades, we did a 4-day canoe trip, 3 nights, and we had a big party. We had 15 people in our party. There's 3 modes of camping. You've got the Chickies, which are freestanding docks that are placed all along the waterway. You've got beach camping, which is legit beach camping, like Pavilion Key here, where you actually have the beach. And then you have island camping, and that's just an island with no beach, but there's firm ground, and there's some of these you can camp on. But some people are going from Everglades City south to Flamingo, and some people are coming from Flamingo up to Everglades City as they're doing their bucket list journey, paddling the waterway or taking their boat along the waterway. And so half the camping is reserved effectively for people going one way and going the other way. So the Chickie's not that big to begin with. You might be able to, in a cramped space, put 8 people on some of these Chickies, but you can't just get and hog up a Chickie, right? They need to allow for people coming both ways. So when you get to your visitor center, you could be in for a rude awakening if you have a very large party like we had, and you just can't figure out how to get everybody down the waterway with a party that big. What we ended up doing, and I'll show you a minute from now, we went up into the 10,000 Islands. There's a lot more beach camping. You can see the white sand here. There's a lot more beach camping. You can accommodate large parties, and we only stayed in one campground, Picnic Key, that was actually part of the Everglades National Park. We actually then spent the rest of our time up here in the unregulated area where you can camp without worrying about reservations. You can camp anywhere you can find a beautiful place to stay at high tide, and you're good to go. Sometimes, for some scenarios, 10,000 islands is excellent. And then other times, like if you're a bucket list Everglades Wilderness Waterway and get all the way down to Flamingo, you can do that through the waterway itself, right? And so you're going to want to come up with a smaller group and have a better plan. And, you know, here's what you do here. You make a plan and you ride loose in the saddle, because you're not sure how it's all going to come together until it comes together. And it may not come together the way you originally thought from a distance. So let's talk about your access points. So if you're going to strictly do the Everglades and you want to stay in the waterway, like come up Lopez and get into the waterway and stay on a Chickee or something like that, or go out to the islands, there's two places you can do that to launch, right? Two key areas. There's Everglades City itself, and then there's Chokoloskee. I've launched at both, and it really kind of depends on what you're kind of doing. So those are the southern or middle route options if you exclude Flamingo. And they give you an opportunity to get all of your ducks in a row before you depart. Then north, and you have the Goodland, a great little place. This is the Homer, Alaska of Florida. It's a cool little fishing village and boating village, and kind of like if you're here, you want something to do with water, salt water, and you want to hang out by an island and fish all day. It's a great little area to visit. And also I would point out, while you're up here, there is Collier Seminole State Park. So Collier Seminole is a state park that's pretty far upriver, and but you can use this as an access point. And some of this area is some of the best fishing too that I've found. And I actually like to fish the northern 10,000 islands better. I like the terrain here a lot more. You'll find, I think, there's more oyster beds per square mile up here. There's more rock and gravel areas. So there's a lot more things that we consider attractive structure for fishing. It's really nice to have a place like Goodland. You got deep water, you got a lot of places you can find to rent or to stay. Everglades City is that way as well. Our last trip down there, we stayed at the Rod and Gun, and that was absolutely fantastic. It was nice. There's a ramp right here that you can drop we were in this cabin actually, and we could just literally drop our boat in, and at the lunchtime we would come and pop the boat back out, and it wasn't a big backlog of people getting in and out of there. There's not that many people using it. So that's the different access points. Again, there's some south in Flamingo. For Goodland, I recommend searching for Goodland properties that are on Airbnb or VRBO. And for Collier Seminole State Park, you can book through Reserve America. And Everglades City and Chokoloskee would be very similar to Goodland. I highly recommend the Rod and Gun Club. It's a nice storied location. When we went out from Chokoloskee down south into the Everglades Scenic Waterway, we came out of Chokoloskee. We stayed at there's a ramp as you come onto the island. There's a ramp here, the fishing hole that you can launch at. But we were staying, so we came over here to this wonderful place, the Chokoloskee Island Resort. You'll probably hear a lot of people talk about this. It's a very common place to go. But this was actually excellent. We were able to launch our boat, and then they escorted us to park our car. So our car was parked on one of their off-premises lots, but everything was very safe, and we were set to go. We didn't need to worry about our vehicle, or we didn't have to worry about anything. We just went off and began our journey for 3 days in running around. The biggest problem you have, obviously, is not hitting hard ground. There's some very crazy shallow stuff here. If you're going to boat here, I recommend Florida Marine Tracks above all things. Or you're going to be just putt-putting along trying not to take out your prop. And Chokoloskee is a wonderful little town, very similar to Goodland in that regard. There's some great history here as well. So that's your key entry and exit points: Chokoloskee, Everglades City, Collier Seminole State Park, and Goodland in the far north. And you're not far, if you're at Goodland, what's nice is you're really not far from Marco Island. So this is going to give you your Publixes and other things like if CVS, pharmacies, they're all going to be somewhat in reach. I mean, if you're on Goodland and all of a sudden you decide, hey, you want a shishi dinner, you can run to Marco Island and you can have anything that you want. So, and also if you break a rod and you need to replace a rod or something, you know, you've got a pretty nice area that's out of the way, but still convenient. So for fishing trips that you're going to go for a long weekend and take the family and the kids down there and have a great time, this is, Goodland is a great beachhead to be able to make that journey and get that process started. This area is largely considered unregulated. That means there's a lot of places you can camp where you don't need to do heavy-duty planning. You can grab all your stuff and go, hit the water, find a beach, and you can set up camp when you find out where the high tide's going to be. That's your places to stay and your access points. Now, I've got here a set of data that I was going to share in the description for this video. So let's start there. So this is the Everglades National Park. This is the actual sort of point one to start visitor center area. And this is going to give you all your details about visiting the Everglades. And all of your background information. I'll put this in the description for the video, but also this is the Wilderness Waterway. But you can see here you're not really in the open ocean anymore like you are or the Gulf of Mexico like you are in Tiger Key and Panther Key and Pavilion Key. So this is a beautiful area, and this is where people love to come and kind of really experience the Everglades. But your waterway is more something you have to plan and spend more time planning on what you're going to do, but also you're at the whim of the Everglades National Park System, and there you can't reserve ahead of time. You got to go. Like for me, I'm driving 4 or 5 hours, 5 hours to get here, to then figure out where I'm going to stay. And if you're a planner, that can drive you nuts. If you go to the waterway, be patient, have some flexibility in your plans, and go from there. It's just very important to know that. If you're going to do a blow in, blow up, and blow out trip, I highly recommend 10,000 Islands. You can do that a whole lot easier. You can stay at Everglades City, go out Indian Key or the back country up towards Fakahatchee. Your boat can handle that. And you can just have pick of the litter. All these islands out here are campable and they're beautiful. And because of their now, a couple of other things that I would want to mention is in addition to the Wilderness Waterway Trip Planner that I mentioned that lets you go through the process, all of your stuff, getting your permit. You've got to take a course online with an awareness thing for how to properly go in and out of the park without with minimizing your footprint and understanding the rules and regulation, campsites, all of this information. And yeah, there's a lot of fees. So that you don't have necessarily at 10,000 Islands out of Goodland. So a lot of stuff to factor in. And but also this is the Everglades National Park boat planning. If you're coming by boat, I highly recommend you study this site. And if you're coming by kayak, take a look at the site, right? So you're going to have some things here that you have to do, but this is critical right here, the maps and navigation. So if you go to maps and navigation, they have one thing here that you absolutely want. It doesn't matter if you're kayaking or boating, you want this Google Earth KMZ file. So a KML file is just a XML file with a bunch of waypoints in it and tracks and trails and such. A KMZ is just a compressed KML. Download this thing. Like if I click on this right away, you're going to watch this whole thing light up, right? So take that out of your temporary places, put that into your a folder that you have for 10,000 Islands or Goodlands, and it's going to give you more information than you need. This is a pretty big amount of data, But what it's going to do, and these different routes and these little mile markers, you'll actually see these mile markers, and they'll tell you where you are. So you can use these to get your bearing. You can say, oh, today's supposed to be a 10-mile day, and I'm halfway done with the day, and I've only gotten 4 miles. I got to really book it, right? So you can actually use these markers along the way. And so that gives you your access and all this information. All the campsites are listed and all the tracks and trails and different things that you could do as a day trip. And you can study this KML. Now, what I'll also show you and recommend that you do is once you have this KML file, again, this KMZ file can be used with Google Earth, but it can also be used with other tools. And one of the tools I'm going to show you here, if you're working on a boat or you have a GPS, handheld GPS, is GPS Visualizer. So with GPS Visualizer, when you click on that, you could say, I want to convert a file. And you're going to go to convert a file and you're going to say the output, I want GPX, right? GPX is the format that is importable into most handheld GPSs. Most Garmin's, Lowrance's, Simrad's are going to take a GPS. So you choose a file, and I'm going to give it that file that I just downloaded, and it's going to convert that into a GPX file. And what that GPX file is now going to be, it's going to be something you can download here, and it's going to give you that KML file, KMZ file is going to be converted into one that you can bring right into your chart plotter or right into your handheld GPS. Now, it's a complex, this one thing bummer about this is a Winnebago sized KML file. They've got such gory details here, which can be really good if you're trying to navigate some of this stuff, right? But at the same time, if you're just doing a day trip, it's a lot of information. And so I highly recommend that you study this. You can extract from that some of the things that you want to do. You might, if you're going to do like a day trip, right, you might take some of the items in a small day trip area and copy it into a separate folder, and pick that folder and right click and say save place as and do a KMZ file of your own. And that way you can create a smaller one to go into your phone or into your GPS device on your watercraft, whether it's kayak or not, or a handheld. I do some things on gadgets, right? 5 years ago, I would have said don't bring a phone and rely on it. Now a lot of phones are IPX8, and you can have them out. They can get dropped into the water to a reasonable degree and still survive. So you can use your phone as an alternative to a GPS. Cache your maps so that because you're not going to have, once you leave this area about right here, the junction of Tamiami Trail and 29, that's like your last cell phone tower. So depends on what your carrier is, you can get really spotty coverage and maybe get a text through, but you don't rely on cell coverage once you leave Everglades City. And so I use a couple of devices. I have a GPS, handheld GPS Garmin that I can take on a trip, but I also have Lowrance units on my boat when I have the skiff. I have a PLB. You could have a personal location beacon or an EPIRB, depending upon how you're configured. I also have a Garmin InReach, and what we did because of COVID and not sure what was going on with our wives back home, the InReach can be very important because we were here for 4 days, and with the InReach, basically it's texting over satellite. So every night or every stop, I could send my family an update with my location using the Garmin InReach, and then they get in that message a clickable link that lets them return a reply to me. So the protocol my wife and I set up, because she's back in Palm Harbor, was that I'm going to send you my location, and at that time, if you are in any sense of urgency or need or need me to cut my trip short and come home, send me a message back, and that way I would burp out my location and I would leave the Garmin inReach on for the next hour and wait for any kind of, for an all clear signal or anything. So a Garmin is really handy because there's no cell coverage, and the further you get down to the waterway, that's more so true. The other thing I highly recommend that you would bring on any journey like this is a VHF radio, and not just a VHF radio for calling the Coast Guard, but also one that has weather and weather alerts. This is very, very important because what you experience in Florida in general, which is what I refer to as forecast decay, right? So a typical forecast for Florida, especially as you get down even more subtropical like the southern tip of Florida, a typical forecast really is only good for 48 hours. It's really, unless the weather is completely placid and you're not in the middle of any kind of system, where you might have 5 days of just beautiful weather back to back. The weather can change on an instant. So your forecast that you hit the beach on and push off and head out is going to start to decay. And by about 48 hours, you're going to need another forecast. You're not going to get one from your mobile phone, right? So every night, what we did is we would spend, the evening as we were making dinner and all that kind of stuff, I would kick on the weather. And you listen to the weather loop, but you can also get alerts pushed to you. There's a couple of times that we actually modified our plans based upon the change in weather, because 2 of our trips here were 4 days. So by the second day, the forecast you came in on is worthless. Things can change. Some other items, the GPS I think is very handy for me because you want to know where you are at any point in time. My VHF does not have a built-in GPS. Maybe you have a newer one, but I want to be able to tell people where I am. The new Garmin inReach has SOS options, so it's kind of sort of like a quasi PLB. But the personal location beacon, you push that button, basically helicopters come. So you don't want to push that for everything, obviously, but you want to have the emergency contact information and your location combined. So Garmin inReach, PLB, VHF with a GPS at a minimum. And again, the VHF is nice because you will get weather information on most VHF radios. It will have a weather option, including the weather alerts. So that's kind of the key things for equipment. The other thing I would point out is, some of the things you might not think about when you're camping that you have to think about here. One is the weather is everything, and that too is true of tides. So if you got a 10-mile day and you turn out that half of that day is against the tide and half of that and that whole day is against a 10 to 15 mile an hour wind, it could be a very difficult day. So plan around tides. The other key thing that you might not think of when you're camping is you have to bring every drop of water that you need. You bring a lot of water, so plan for every ounce of drinking water. So water is a big deal. The other big deal, one of the biggest annoyances you'll have to deal with out here, obviously, is bugs, especially at the dinner hour and a little bit in the morning. A bug net is critical. Staying out in the open where you get wind is helpful. Full clothing is critical for bugs. That's the best way to deal with it, is wind, clothing, and a bug net. And so wear clothing, have a bug net, stay in the wind. So let's see. The only other thing that I would say before I close this thing out is this is a lot of fun. This is a part of Florida. We don't have a lot of wilderness left. But 10,000 Islands and Everglades are bucket list destinations. They're a lot of fun. You get to, fish all day and eat what you catch that night. So highly recommend anybody do this, but there are some planning things. I know this was a long-winded thing, but it's kind of like a number of different people I've talked to want to know how to go and do this, and it's helpful to talk to people that have done it. I hope this video helps, and you have a great time if you plan a trip to 10,000 Islands Everglades National Park or the Everglades Wilderness Waterway. Thank you very much.